Well, let's bring in today's political panel now, and joining us, Labor Senator Nita Green. Nita's in Cairns. Welcome from afar, Nita. And Liberal MP Jenny Ware is in Sydney. Jenny, welcome back to the program. Why don't we start there?
Greg.
Yeah, thank you. Where Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese left off, and I might start with you, Jenny, since this is Peter Dutton's claim that's being put to the government that visas for people seeking to flee the Israel-Hamas war somehow aren't being processed rigorously or correctly. What evidence, Jenny Ware, is there for this claim?
Well, thank you, Greg. This issue came about from questions that were answered in Senate estimates, and it appears that we have had about 2,000 people from Palestine processed and approved for visas, and the issue is the length of time that this has taken. Some of them have been processed in only 24 hours, and I know that the ABC also reported that in some cases they have been processed in under an hour. And the questions that Peter is asking, and I think these are questions that the Australian people want answers to, is have there been the proper security and identity checks done as we're allowing people to come into our country that are coming from a desperate situation and from a war zone in a country that is controlled and has been controlled for almost 20 years by a terrorist organisation, Hamas. So this is about ensuring that the Home Affairs Minister and the government assures Australia, Greg, that Australians are safe and Australians are not at risk.
All right, that's the case being made here, Nita Green. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've been in and around committees that have examined some of these questions with Home Affairs and immigration officials in the past. Why should we and how can we be satisfied that all of those checks are being done appropriately?
Yeah, well, thanks, Craig. And I'm actually the chair of that committee, so I'm fully aware of what evidence there is available. And what I'd say is that the claims that Peter Dutton is making are baseless and don't have evidence, because we know that there is a process that is being undertaken, that process is no different to any other process of processing visas for people from similar situations, but they are going through the usual checks, and the security checks particularly, and the public servants that are responsible for undertaking these checks do a very good job. We really do support them in the work that they're doing. We don't want to undermine the work that they're doing. They make sure that they do all the checks that they need to keep Australians safe, and that's why we've seen a fairly small amount of people actually approved for these visas, and we know that there is a subsequent amount of people who've actually been rejected. Right. I think we've seen from this situation another example of Peter Dutton trying to create some sort of negative story, again, to get attention or to fearmonger, when really politicians, particularly the leaders of our country, should be trying to use language that promotes social cohesion and brings people together. Yeah. It's really disappointing to see this again from Peter Dutton.
Just because you heard the evidence being given, Nita, can I just put to you the point made by Jenny and earlier by Peter Dutton about the one-day turnaround, or allegedly in some cases 1 hour turnaround in the application. Is that normal?
Well, look, these processes haven't changed. We haven't introduced a new set of protocols. They are the same protocols that people need to follow, and they are being followed, and those checks are being done. And it's for Peter Dutton to explain why he doesn't support the public servants that are doing these checks. I think it's an extraordinary statement, actually, from a former Home Affairs Minister who would have been the leader of a department doing exactly the same types of routine checks from people who, as Jenny admitted, are coming from a very desperate situation. It's an awful situation that people are coming from, and there are situations where people have documents, they are being checked, and those processes are being followed.
All right. OK, let's go to the workplace. Everyone's got an interest in this and a familiarity by now, Jenny Ware, with work from home as a practice. Now, we discover that Fair Work is taking submissions on this as to whether this should be a negotiating right within minimum awards. Since it's become, Jenny, such a feature of the workplace, why not formalise it as a standard right, or at least something to be negotiated?
Well, I think, first of all, Greg, the important thing to remember is this is not the Fair Work Commission just looking at this unilaterally. The Fair Work Commission has been charged from September last year by Minister Tony Burke to have a look at a whole range of award conditions. So this is still another part of Tony Burke's fairly radical industrial relations agenda, and also it shows work from home is about flexibility, and I think in 2024 employers and employees are well and truly able to decide whether and to make these sensible arrangements between themselves. I don't think this needs Minister Burke or the Fair Work Commission or unions involved in these discussions.
But do you agree, Jenny, that it in many cases does boost productivity because it cuts down on the travel time? You can kind of get on the tools at home, can't you, straight away at shift start time. There are advantages, aren't there?
Oh, certainly. And Greg, I know there are about 2.2 million Australians at this point in time that are working from home on a regular basis and on a semi-regular basis. And I think work from home has some very positive advantages. It has positive advantages for employees, and it can have positive advantages to businesses as well.
Right.
But this is a conversation that needs to be had on an individual basis to ensure that the right outcome is there for both the employer and the employee.
Right.
And Greg, I should just say that coming from Sydney, I know that many businesses, particularly in the CBD, have really struggled with people working permanently from home. So I think that there is a balance there to be struck, and I would hope that employers and employees can work this out in a sensible way under a flexible workplace relationship.
I'm sure there are downsides, and that would probably be acknowledged by everyone. But Nita Green, if it were to be locked into awards sort of unilaterally, if you like, by the Fair Work Commission, that removes flexibility, doesn't it, for all concerned?
Well, far from removing flexibility, it actually provides more flexibility for more workers and more employers. And I think it's a very sensible thing to be having a consultation about this issue and many other issues that would help our awards be modernised and meet the needs of workers and employees at the same time. I don't think there's anything radical about working from home, and I think we saw a lot of people take up that opportunity during the COVID pandemic, but particularly mothers returning to work. I know a lot of my friends who have young children take advantage of this. What is really important, though, is having some guidelines about what your rights might be and what employers expect. And that's what this review is about. There's been some good consultation. It's good to get the conversation started. And I really look forward to there being an approach to awards that mean that people who are under those conditions would have the same opportunities as someone who has the power to negotiate their individual contract.
All right. Well, I think there's a little bit of agreement there between you both on participation advantages for women. Look, time's going to run out on us very, very quickly, Nita and Jenny, but I was keen to get a quick view from both of you. 4-year terms for the Parliament. The Prime Minister's kind of bemoaned publicly the fact that we can't quite get there. Of course, that would require a referendum, and that's not happening anytime soon. But as a matter of principle, yay or nay? Jenny Ware?
First of all, the Prime Minister has guaranteed, as he started this conversation, that there'll be no election, no federal election this year. I think that if the Prime Minister wants to promote discussion about 4-year terms, then that is something that we will certainly engage in. And if the Prime Minister then wants to take it to a referendum next year, when he's going to call the federal election, then the Prime Minister, I think he's had a recent bruising with a referendum outcome, so he'll probably maybe take this referendum, if he does choose to do so, a little bit differently.
Yeah, I'm sure
Greg.
that's the case. I'm sure that's the case. Jenny, doesn't directly affect you, I suppose, in the first instance, Nita Green being a senator, but as a principal.
Well, I was going to say be a brave senator who would argue for 8-year terms, which is would be one of the outcomes from having 4-year terms. Look, I'm a Queenslander, and in Queensland we have the state has 4-year terms, and it does provide some stability to the government, but also to the community, particularly around when funding arrangements are happening. So, look, it's a conversation, but there's no plans at this stage.
All right. let's continue that conversation. I'm pretty sure we might in the years ahead, particularly with by-elections coming around so frequently. But anyway, Jenny Ware, we're going to thank you. Nita Green, same to you. Really appreciate it. We got across everything we hoped to, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Nita.
Thanks, Greg.